I'm Marin.
I'm Sky. And I'm Michaela, and we're here to dive into the history of these,
our national parks.
Today, almost everyone knows of the national parks. People from all over the world flock to these monuments, historical locations, and national wonders. But how did we get here? How did the term national park become almost synonymous with conservation? The formation of the national park system was a turning point in history, as it created more awareness around conservation, as well as creating jobs and opportunities for conservationists and laymen alike.
Today, environmental conservation is a common concern, but in the 1800s it was a foreign concept. Not many people were aware of what humans were gradually doing to the land. They didn't know the negative impacts their unsustainable farming practices and pollution-heavy production lines would have on the environment.
Just before the foundation of the NPS was the Industrial Revolution, which was the first spark in the country's land distortion. It introduced mass production, making items more expendable and increasing the US's waste. Another thing changing the land was agriculture. States like Texas, Kansas, and Wyoming had large grazing lands for cattle. So many animals in one place trampled and ate native plants, making the soil loose and dry. Meanwhile, Minnesota, Illinois, and Nebraska focused on growing crops. Their overuse of the soil sucked it dry of its nutrients. This would eventually contribute to the devastating Dust Bowl. As the land was converted to this new man-made environment, some leaders in our country realized its flaws. They would become the first environmental conservationists.
One such conservationist was John Muir, a Scottish-born naturalist with a deep love for the Yosemite Valley. Muir was born on April 21st, 1838 and passed away on December 24, 1914. During his lifetime, Muir attended Wisconsin College and worked on mechanical inventions. After almost being dragged down by the company, he turned himself toward nature. He would walk along the Gulf of Mexico, keeping a journal about what he saw. In 1876, after traveling around the U.S. experiencing nature, Muir presented the idea of adopting forest conservation policy to the federal government. He became the central figure of this debate over land use, and his love for the land would last for a lifetime. As long as I live, I'll hear the waterfalls and birds and winds sing. I'll interpret the rocks, learn the language of flood, storm, and the avalanches. I'll acquaint myself with the glaciers and royal gardens, and get as near the heart of the world as I can. John Muir.
John Muir, along with other early conservationists, saw our country's beauty as something future generations should get to experience. They wanted people to see nature as the wonderful and pure thing that they did. They had an idea to have government-protected land for people to be able to recreate and enjoy. The idea for this was the National Park System.
This small group of powerful leaders devised a plan to form a government organization solely devoted to the protection and preservation of these natural wonders. The National Park System creates safe habitats for animals, conserves the beauty of our land, and raises people's awareness of what our country once looked like. This showed people how beautiful the earth was before our effect, and caused people to think more about what they could do to maintain its beauty every time they visited a national park.
One such figure was the famous Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. In his new nationalism speech in 1910, he said, "Conservation means developing as much as it does protecting. I recognize the right and duty of this generation to develop and use the natural resources of our land, but I do not recognize the right to waste them or to rob by wasteful use the generations that come after us." Famously known as the conservationist president, Teddy became invested in the NPS after John Muir took him on a camping trip in the Yosemite Valley. He was awestruck and began advocating for a system to protect these national beauties. In fact, despite pushbacks from Congress, Roosevelt used his executive power to declare the Grand Canyon a national monument in 1908.
To accomplish tranquility in these parks, they had to get backing from the government. On March 1st, 1872, an act to set apart a certain tract of land lying near the headwaters of the Yellowstone River as a public park was signed by President Ulysses S. Grant, making Yellowstone a national park. Passing laws for this cause was often favored by government officials because lots of political figures were involved in and supported it. When Teddy Roosevelt was president, he created 5 national parks, mostly thanks to his passing of the Antiquities Act. This allowed a president to declare anything a national park, even if it was not agreed upon by Congress. Other laws keep people from poaching as well as being poached. It protects people as much as the environment, keeping everyone safe.
The NPS also created many jobs in addition to the rangers. The CCC also played a big role in what is known today as parkitecture. The Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC, was founded during the Great Depression to provide jobs. It allowed young men to help improve national parks and infrastructure in exchange for food, a bed, and $30 a month. Hundreds would enlist, helping to reestablish the economy. Many of the parks being built around the same time by the same people led to something called parkitecture, which is a style of building using natural materials with the purpose of blending into the natural environment. Thus, parks and forests were built with wood from the surrounding area, while parks in the desert were built in the style of adobe houses.
Stephen Ting Mather was one of the biggest political advocates for the parks and played a big role in funding. He popularized the research of natural science and used the parks as a way to study it. After the foundation of the first park, he continued to support them financially and kept them alive. He is one of the major factors in why the parks are still functioning today.
While the national parks have done many amazing things for our country and continue to today, there were also some unfortunate effects. The Native Americans who had lived on these vast expanses of wilderness were forced off into reservations.
In 2022, there were 312 million recreational visits to the national parks. People came from all over the world to visit these landmarks. That's billions of people learning about the natural world and our role in protecting it. With more and more schools partnering with the NPS, students of all ages can learn hands-on lessons about history, science, and the future of our planet. Just think, if even a small portion of these kids grow up using what they've learned, they could easily change the world for the better.
Today, there are over 400 national parks in 150 regions across the country. This system has created jobs, volunteer opportunities, and educational programs. Billions of visitors can learn about our history and natural wonders, bringing this knowledge into their everyday lives. Other countries have also formed their own national park systems in order to preserve their landmarks. This ripple effect could never have been predicted when the idea first came about. It just goes to show that if a person is dedicated to improving the world, there is no limit to how far they may go. So go forth
And find your cause!